We all talk every single day, but how often do we actually master it? Today, we're going to dive into something really powerful, a simple little habit, thinking before you speak. So, let's get right into it.
Oh man, I'm sure you've been there, right? That split second after you say something and you just think, oh, I wish I could just suck those words right back in. It's such a universal feeling. And honestly, it's not really our fault. We're wired to want to jump in, to add to the conversation. But, well, sometimes that impulse can land us in some hot water.
I love this quote because it just nails it, doesn't it? Words are exactly like toothpaste. Once they're out, they are out. They're permanent. You can say, I'm sorry. You can try to explain what you meant to say, but you just can't put it all back in the tube. You're just left with this mess that sorry doesn't always clean up.
So the big question is, how do we stop making that mess to begin with? Well, lucky for us, there's a really simple, super effective tool we can use. It's like a 5-step mental filter, a little checklist you can run your words through before they ever come out. And it's called the THINK framework.
Yep, THINK. It's an acronym for 5 simple questions. Is it true? Is it helpful? Inspiring? Necessary? And kind? You can almost think of it as the golden rule for speaking with a little more thought. So let's break each of these down one by one. All right, first up, T is for true. This is basically your own personal fact checker. And look, in the world we live in today, with all the misinformation flying around, this first step is probably more important than ever. Before you say something, just ask yourself, do I know this is a fact, or am I just passing along some gossip I heard? Because, spreading rumors, it helps absolutely no one. Okay, next we have H for helpful. This one is all about your intention. Why are you really saying this? Is it actually to help the other person, to be constructive? Or are you maybe just venting, trying to get something off your chest? The goal here should be to actually help, not just to unload your own stuff. Then we've got I for inspiring. And let's be real, there's already so much negativity out there. Your words, they have this incredible power to actually build someone up. Even if you have to give some tough feedback, you can always find a way to frame it that inspires them to grow instead of just tearing them down. Next up is N for necessary. Now, this one's interesting because it makes you question whether you should speak at all. Sometimes the most powerful, the most thoughtful thing you can contribute to a conversation is nothing. It's just silence. So you got to ask yourself, am I really adding value here, or am I just talking to fill the quiet? And that brings us to the last and maybe the most important gatekeeper, K, for kind. Look, something can be true, helpful, and even necessary, but if it's not kind, should you say it? This is the final check. What's the emotional fallout going to be? Are you saying this with compassion, or is there a little part of you that's trying to land a blow?
There's this story that just hits this point home so perfectly. Picture this. You're on a train, and these young guys start making fun of another young man who's acting with this almost childlike wonder. They're calling him mad. Finally, they go to his father and say something, and the father just calmly explains, "My son was born blind. He just got his sight today." He was literally seeing the world for the first time. All those unkind words, they were coming from a place of not knowing the whole story.
Okay, so running through that whole THINK checklist, it sounds great in theory, right? But it's pretty much impossible if you're just, blurting out the first thing that comes to mind. To actually make it work, you need to build one simple, but incredibly powerful habit. What I call the mental pause. And that pause is what separates two very different things, reacting and responding. Reacting, that's your knee-jerk, emotional, impulsive thing. But responding, that's thoughtful, that's considered. And the only thing that stands between the two, it's that tiny little bit of space you create for yourself when you just pause. And I want to be really clear about this. Taking that moment is not a sign of weakness. It's the exact opposite. It's a sign of confidence. It is totally okay to say, you know what? That's a good point. Let me think about that for a second. All it shows is that you respect the other person and the conversation enough to give a real, thoughtful answer. So that brings us to the second key habit that makes all this possible. It's tied directly to that pause. Because what are you supposed to do in that quiet moment? Well, you don't just think, you listen. You really listen. It's pretty simple, really. You can't give a thoughtful response if you haven't actually heard and understood what the other person is saying.
When you listen, really listen, you get the context you need. That's how you avoid those cringy moments where you totally misunderstand something and put your foot in your mouth. We've all been there. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the how, right? The THINK framework, the power of the pause, and the importance of listening. But let's wrap this up by focusing on the why. What's the actual real-world payoff for getting good at this? Why does it matter?
Honestly, the benefits are huge. When you start speaking more thoughtfully, people respect you more. They respect what you have to say. It builds this incredible trust that strengthens all of your relationships, both at work and at home. You stop causing accidental hurt. And ultimately, the words you choose to say, they reveal your true character and your intelligence way more than just being the quickest person to talk.
Which kind of brings us to this beautiful closing thought. It's not about the quantity of your words. It's about the quality. It's about the impact. One single, thoughtful word that brings a little bit of peace is so much more powerful than 1,000 hollow ones.
Because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. Every single word you speak is a building block. You're either building bridges with people or you're building walls. You're creating something positive or something negative. Your words, they literally create your world. So the only question left for you is, what are you going to build?